Jim do while you were in DeKalb? Did he stay at Madison?
No, Jim left.
Did he send him away too?
Yeah.
I find this so odd that he would send
Well, no,
him
Jim
away.
stayed, Jim may have been a year behind me, I'm not sure. No, Jim finished his dissertation on 𝗗𝗄𝗆𝘆, something about 𝗗𝗄𝗆𝘆. It was a sociologist at that time. I was more focused in on Parsons and Schill's. And
Yes, right.
Jim was, and he did something in that area. I don't remember what it was. Jim finished before he left. I think, I'm not sure of that,
Yeah.
but he went to the University of Texas.
First. Or Milwaukee.
Oh yeah. Oh, Milwaukee was third.
Really?
I think it was third. Now I may be mistaken on that. Because
Austin or
pardon?
else? Austin, Texas?
Yeah, he went to the University of Texas because Virgil had friends there
Yeah,
too.
right. That's the way it works.
And he was there part of the time while I was, and I don't know the timing exactly. He was there while I was at DeKalb. I went to Teachers College when he was still at Texas, and in thinking about that, afterwards, within the last several years, in fact, I often wondered why Virgil recommended me rather than Jim for the Teachers College job. And I don't know what the reason. I don't know why. I don't know. I don't know if I was a favorite in Virgil's eyes. Jim was well respected.
You were good and that you weren't kidding yourself.
Yeah, well, that could be. Virgil and I had a really nice relationship. He was very supportive, and I remember once, I think after Virgil had died, meeting one of my old doctoral students in a professional meeting someplace, and talking about the significance of Virgil Herrick for me, and started to cry. And it was obvious that Virgil had been a father figure for me. I wasn't aware of it at the time, but as I look back upon it, I felt his support no matter what I did, and was willing to keep me moving. I would not have gone to Teachers College if Virgil had not recommended to Max Corey that I be there. But the other way that I got involved in the Teachers College bit is that a large number of the faculty at DeKalb were Teachers College graduates. And there was a research project between Teachers College, Northern Illinois, and Ball State that we were all involved in. Margaret Lindsay and Forde Stratemeyer and a variety of other people were involved in that. So they saw me in operation, and that's how I eventually got the invitation. And I'm sure that Virgil had a great deal to do writing to Max, say, you ought to get in touch with this guy or something like that.
Were you able to stay in touch with Jim pretty regularly?
Oh yeah, Jim and I always stayed in
Did
touch.
you write each other letters or talk?
We would meet frequently at professional meetings. Jim left University of Texas and came to NYU.
I didn't remember that. Yeah.
And that's
When you
why.
were at TC.
Well, I was at TC. He came either probably the second or maybe the third year. I don't remember which, because I was still living in New Jersey at that time, and I loaned him my car to do something with.
And he lived in Manhattan, do you think, or?
No, he lived in Brooklyn at that
He lived in
time.
Brooklyn.
And we used to go. We were very close, so we did things together.
Right.
And then he went from there. Now, I'm not sure. He was at Milwaukee twice, and I don't remember the time intervals there.
Before he went to Greensboro.
Yeah, and he.
So what did you guys talk about? Everything?
Everything that we were reading. We were all reading the same. We were reading the same thing.
Is that right?
We would come together, and we were both reading phenomenology, and I wasn't saying what I was reading, but we'd come together and we just happened to be reading the same
You
thing.
never fell into Heidegger like you did, though.
No.
Some differences in emphasis.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, there was big difference. He became more interested, particularly when he was at Milwaukee, he became more interested perhaps in psychological aspects and supervisory teacher education phenomena than I did. He played with the big ideas, but he didn't necessarily pursue them with the kind of depth that I did.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
Because he was more of a...
He was really, he was really a school person, and he really wanted to support teachers. And I was less a school person and less concerned about supporting teachers, although I certainly did. But
his paper at the Rochester conference was that transcendental developmental.
yeah.
Yeah, he tried. So there's the transcendental word.
Yes, there. Well, we were both.
Yeah.
Jim came out of a Lutheran background, and
A liberal one or Missouri?
no, it was liberal.
Yeah.
His mother and his father were divorced. I remember when his father.
Where did he grow up? Do you remember? Not to.
In Madison.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh, my
yeah.
goodness.
His father was out in California. And again, it must have been my third year there because I still had the car. We went to the airport, maybe to take his dad, maybe to pick up his dad, I don't remember. And his dad was one of the first people to fly on a jet airliner.
Really?
In my experience. Jim and I don't know if Jim was in this, but I remember flying back from California. I'll talk more about that in a minute. In the rear of one of the big propeller-driven airplanes, where smoking was loud, and I was in the very back choking, so to speak. Jim and at Teachers College, the faculty were given the money to attend one professional conference a year, and I was already a member of AFCD. I became a member of that early.
And it was still progressive.
And I also was early in terms of my membership of AERA, because I joined that when I was at the University of Wisconsin, with one of 1,500 at that time. But Teachers College gave us the choice of going to a conference. I looked at a variety of conferences and saw that one was being held in San Francisco. So I joined the National Council of Social Studies.
So you could go.
So I could go to...
You've never been to San Francisco?
Oh yeah, no, I'd spent time in San Francisco in the Army. I had fond memories of San Francisco, yeah. So but that's how I got associated with social studies, and that's why eventually I taught a course in
Did you really?
social studies in the elementary school. Mm-hmm. Which was I think I taught it 2 or 3 times. And in order to teach that, because it was, Alice Miley used to teach it, something like it, I don't remember what the title was. She stopped, and I knew that we needed to do that. So I sat in on the secondary social studies methods course, taught by some woman, in order to get my creds with that department. And then I developed what I thought was a really interesting course and had a lot of students in it for a couple of years. So
it was a booming field
Yeah.
for a long time.
yeah. So does that explain the and Virgil was always supportive. You know, when I'm sure he provided opportunities for me to have things to do with AERA, and not that I did many things with him, but
Right.
but I was active in AERA for a long time.
His wife, Helen.
Right.
Helen. Yeah.
Helen, Virg and Helen were really good with graduate students. They were the ideal faculty mentors of young people. They would have us over to their house frequently, and of course,
Drinks and dinner.
yeah. And Jim and I, of course, as part of the research team, would go out and have drinks with them occasionally and things of that kind. He was an ideal mentor. And the way I worked with my students at Teachers College was clearly based on my experience with Virg. There's no question. And even though Paul was responsible for bringing me there, I identify Virgil as my major professor, even though I'm sure Paul had as much to do. But I don't remember Paul's influence on me as much as I remember Virgil's influence on me. So.
Was there a third person on your committee?
Yeah, it was Chet Harris in statistics,
Okay.
Hans Gerth,
All right.
Paul must have been on it. There must have been 5.
5.
Virgil and a guy that taught counseling psychology. I can't think of his name right now.
Right.
I remember that because I had tried to work on my dissertation while I was at Northern Illinois, and as a beginning college teacher, you don't have time, and I tried to work on it during the summers, and I'd go back to Wisconsin and work on it. I still didn't finish it. I went to Teachers College and without it. Yeah, and and after the second, no, not recommended at all. And I remember flying back to Wisconsin for my doctoral exam, passing it without trouble, although I'm sure that if I had been a member of that committee, I would have given myself a hell of a hard time. I don't have any question about that. Coming home on the airplane and drinking martinis, going to a party immediately in somebody's apartment in New York, where Florence Stratemeyer was, and left early. The person that I remember was Johnsick, the historian. I don't remember her first name.
Yeah, I don't either.
She did the work on Thorndike.
Yeah, oh, right. And she went to Berkeley later.
Well, she went to Berkeley, and we were might have been. We were reasonably close, but I continued to drink. I was
Martinis.
I don't know if it was. I was so drunk
I bet.
that doctoral students had to drive me home and put me to bed.
Well.
And I mean, it was awful.
Yeah.
But I was celebrating the fact 5 years. I got it. But it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing. I don't remember the doctoral students that did it. I must have had my car there. I'm not sure that
you were in New Jersey.
I was still in New Jersey then. Yeah. So.
You talk about how long it took you to write your dissertation, but present day, 5 years is average, if not the minimum. What was the average at that point?
Oh, I can't answer that because the dissertations at that time, particularly in the field of education, were not necessarily as rigorous as I would make them or as they should have been.
But there was no institutional demand to finish, right?
No, there was no institutional demand that I'm aware of. Yeah.
Yeah, the UBC wants you out in 3 years. Almost no one does.
Yeah, and Yale tends to do that. Duke doesn't do it quite as much, apparently. There are some people who've been on their dissertations quite a while. And the way Yale did that was to make sure that the expense was too much to bear. You had to pay to be enrolled.
Right, continuous enrollment. Right.
Yeah. So yeah, but the problem was that I was not a writer. It was a struggle.
It was a statistical dissertation.
No, it wasn't. It was a conceptual thing. I used Parsons and Schill's. To look at classroom interaction. It wasn't a very good dissertation. I have no idea what happened to my copy of it. It's no longer available for me. I think I know where it went, but I'm not.
You've got a copy apparently.
Yeah, if you want me to send it to you.
No, I don't want a copy. Hell no. I don't even suggest you read it.
I hope you don't have mine.
That was yours bad too.
I have yours as well.
Oh, dear, blackmail.
What did you do yours on?
Oh, I did a design of a humanities curriculum based on juxtaposing solitude and group encounter.
Oh.
But using R.D. Laing and...
Oh, really? R.D. Laing? Oh, God.
Yeah.
I forgot about R.D. Laing. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, don't use us as examples not to follow.
That's right.
Yeah. But the dissertation requirements should be much greater. That's one of the reasons I left Teachers College, because the demands for an EDD could be pretty damn sloppy.
Yeah,
Florence Stratemeyer, we used to have something like 10, 15 doctoral students a year, and you can't do anything with that.
No.
Margaret Lindsay did the same thing, and Alice Mile almost as many.
Yeah.
I had maybe one every 2 years or something like that.
Yeah, you can't do that.
And Arno had quite a reasonable amount.
Yeah. Well, those were the days. There were jobs for everybody, and there
That's
was
right.
great demand.
That's right.
It was the emergency of the moment. What a different moment it was. By the time I graduated in '72, jobs were scarce.
Were they?
Yeah, I had two nibbles, one at Santa Barbara and one at Rochester. And Rochester came through first, and the old bird in hand.
Now, I forgot when Mike went to Wisconsin.
70, I think.
It probably was.
69 or 70.
Because he wasn't involved in my marriage, but he was at least aware of it because
That's when the breakup was.
no, Jennifer and I
Getting married.
we're getting married because Jennifer knew Mike. In fact, Jennifer told Mike, because they were in classes together at one time, that you should go talk to Dwayne. And that was before Jennifer and I were very close. You know.
Interesting.
So.
Does the job market from the 70s mirror what it is today? As far as
It's worse. It's worse now.
it's worse.
Oh yeah, much worse now.
Yeah.
Both in terms of the number of jobs, but also in terms of the requirements and expectations. You weren't quite as expected to have written stuff then, and I think to have written stuff today would be...
They want the graduate students to have published
Yeah,
articles for
yeah.
admission to the PhD
Yeah,
program.
that's... Jeez.
And then they make them do a grant. Well, they don't make you, but they encourage you to do a grant.
Really?
The first term, the first month you're there. And
Wow.
So you have to decide what you're doing. It's terrible.
Yeah, I could never have done that. I appreciate the slowness of my development at Teachers College. I mean, at University of Wisconsin.
I was
I
still
mean,
early years
and
ago.
Virgil and Paul were supportive of that gradual development. Yeah.
Does Ellen face the same consequences or the same stress
Oh,
pressures currently?
Well, she doesn't face it because she's a natural writer. She loves to write. She's been writing ever since she got her dissertation. You know, her first book was, her dissertation was on Ezekiel. And it was a careful exegetical study of Ezekiel. So she proved to the guild that she was a traditional Old Testament scholar who could handle the language problems and the exegetical work as well as the philosophical work. She left that and did her first book, as I recall, on preaching, because she was aware that part of the problem in the church was the quality of preaching, and that she was very interested in, I'll have to go look at a very famous English preacher. She has 5 volumes of his work out there. And what she did was look at preaching in the 17th century to get clues about the nature of preaching. And that was her second book. I don't remember, I think she did another book on preaching of a different kind. Yeah, then she was invited to do the Beecher lectures back at Yale, and she did it on preaching the Old Testament. The first one was on preaching in terms of style and dependency upon biblical literature, but not necessarily Old Testament. And then she did the Old Testament thing. And from there she went to, and this is a result of the close relationship between her and her assistants, who were teaching assistants. They were getting ready to make an exam up for the Old Testament course at the beginning of the year, and one of her students said, "You need to put a question in there about land, because consistently throughout this course you've talked about land." And she said, "I have," and that called that to her attention. So she began to explore questions about land in terms of the Bible, and ran across the work of Wendell Berry and Wes Jackson. And we attended a lecture by Wes Jackson at Yale at that time, and she had looked at some of his work and was intrigued by it, and wrote to him and said, "Do you mind could I come out and visit your research there?" Because Wes is the person in the world, in fact, who said, it isn't a matter of solving agriculture. This is very parallel to what we're doing. It isn't a matter of solving agricultural problems. The problem is agriculture itself. And we have to solve the problem of agriculture. And the major problem of agriculture in the West is that it is oil dependent. Both in terms of fertilizer, but also in terms of equipment, and the fact that we are destroying the soil by our agriculture, and gradually the soil resources of the United States are being lost. And he then argued that we must have a perennial grain which doesn't have to be, in which the earth doesn't have to be torn up every year and nitrogen fertilizers put on it. And so he developed, tried to develop grains that had roots that were 6 feet deep.
Oh my goodness.
And trying to develop grains then that would not fracture and blow off, but could be harvested without destroying the plant. And then looking for compatible kinds of planting. So it was a return to the old Midwest plain culture of perennial grains and perennial flowers. So they were looking at the relationship between grains and sunflowers and other kinds of things. Well, now he has people all over the world who are looking at different forms of agricultural production. Well, so she went out there and was called back to give a lecture, and Wes said, "How come, Ellen, that the Bible has it right about everything in terms of farming, agriculture?" And this led her then to explore that in terms of scripture, agriculture, and culture, where she looked at a variety of biblical texts, Old Testament texts, in terms of the way they handle land and farming and so on and so forth. And she was then asked to deliver the series of lectures in Cambridge, and that led to that book on scripture, culture, and agriculture. And when that was through, she still maintains very close contact with Wendell Berry. In fact, Wendell wrote the introduction to her book.
You know, Bill Dole and Wendell Berry
Are close, are they? I didn't know
they're in
that.
touch.
Oh, are they?
Wendell Berry was at his house once. I was there.
Oh, I've been to Wendell's house a couple times. Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What was that connection? Do you know?
I don't remember.
Oh, I'll
But
check
he
that
went
out.
to LSU and,
I'll have to check.
yeah.
Do you know him?
I was at dinner that night.
I
don't know him. But
He's a lovely
Yeah.
guy, just a lovely guy.
Gentle.
And Wes Jackson is like that, and the two of them are close friends. We had them for dinner one night, and to see these two very well-known people have such a good time and enjoy each other was a real joy. Yeah. And then the recent book that she's working on was, she is one of 3 people designing a series of books on the Bible for church people. So Rick Lisher, who is the homiletician, did it on the parables, and Stanley did it on something else out of his own field. And they wanted her to do something, I forgot which, and she said, "No, I don't really want to do that. What would you like to write?" I think I'd like to write in prophecy. So, so she moves from interest to interest, and then all of her seminars are tied to that work, so the writing comes out of the seminars. And the next book that she's doing now, because she's coming to her own ending teaching career, this may be the last time she'll teach the Old Testament 2-semester course. So she is now preparing those lectures for publication, which will be an introduction to the Old Testament. Not an introduction, but some reflections on that. And now she's playing with, and this could turn into a book at a later time, because of her African interests, and that comes out of a different stream of concern, is the relationship between African interpretations and interpretations in the West of the Bible. And she became involved in Africa because when we were at Virginia Theological Seminary, there were 2 bishops from Africa, one from Sudan and the other from one of the other countries in that area, who were bishops. And she became very close to the Sudanese bishop. He was there for 1 year and was taking her Old Testament course. And they became very close professional friends. She said, "How can I help?" What was his name? He's now the Archbishop of Sudan, Southern Sudan. And Bishop Daniel said, "You can come and teach. You can come to Sudan and teach." "What should I teach?" "You can come and teach Hebrew, because we don't have anybody translating the Hebrew Bible into our native languages." She said, "Okay." So she went, first time for 10 days or maybe 2 weeks, and taught it. And then the following year she had her Hebrew students go over and teach and help them work on that. And then she's been working with other projects, including her interest in agriculture, because part of the problem in southern Sudan was food sufficiency. She has a friend here from her contacts with School of Environment who created a kind of maize that is drought resistant and disease resistant, which is perfect for Sudan. And so they have started a program in agriculture near one of their Bible schools, training colleges, or whatever you want to call it, which has been messed up now because of the war in South Sudan. But the other thing is working with a medical doctor here in town who was the medical director for the county of Wade County, who got an MDiv while he was doing that. And he became interested in South Sudan and going with her, and realized that there were health problems. So they have developed a course of study for the Sudanese people dealing with health, nutritional, health and nutritional things based upon the Old Testament. And so that's how she's got involved in all these things. Yeah, and she too has been driven by this kind of curiosity and hasn't gotten stabilized in any particular field. So, so it's been great.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, pretty fascinating.
Well,
What time is it?
It's till 5:30.
Oh, well, we can go.
The acknowledgement of that was an acknowledgement of the otherness in you. It felt like...
Oh, well, that's clearly part of, again, I'm not sure I want to use the word religious, but that's clearly an awareness of the religious or mystical dimension of which I am a part. I am much more than I know I am. I am much more than I know my personality is. What else could I have been, or what else could I be? What else is within me? What else is within the student? What else is within you? And what kind of suffering do you have to go through in order to get rid of the stuff that blocks the emergence, hence the lure of the transcendent. I didn't use that kind of language, but that was clearly there. A thankfulness, in Heidegger's terms, it is the thinking, thanking, dinkin, dankin relationship. To use speech without thankfulness is a mistake. To be thankful without thinking is a mistake. And if you speak truthfully, you must speak. I don't know why it messes me up.